Okay, it's 12 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and begin. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm your host, Josh, with Recover Appalachia. I'm the founder and director of Recover Appalachia. We'll get into a little bit about the organization here in a moment. But for now, just want to give you a quick heads up. We are recording the webinar for further distribution and for posting on our YouTube channel and all the future things. So just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded. What we're going to do today is I'm going to give a little presentation first, and that's going to flow into a conversation that we're going to have with a special guest speaker that we have here with us today, hiding in the audience, that I'll introduce just a little bit later. And then at the end, we will kind of open the forum for some Q&A, for some conversation based on the presentation and conversation. So if any point in the presentation you have a question come to mind, or you would just like to drop a comment, please feel free to do that in the chat. We have somebody monitoring there. So at the end, I'll welcome you to unmute yourself and speak out if you have a question or something you'd like to discuss. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. You can just drop your question in the chat and we'll make sure to get to it at the end. All right. So I want to begin this conversation by framing it around a question. I assume that everybody's joining us or maybe watching this later works in some capacity in reentry. So you're working with individuals who perhaps are in recovery from a substance use disorder, or individuals who are justice impacted in some way, have experienced or are experiencing incarceration. And the question that we are concerned with, that I believe concerns all of you today here, is why? Why do individuals who often leave the highly structured environment of treatment or incarceration end up relapsing or end up cycling back into the system at some point? What are the barriers? What are the impediments to long-term success in reentry? Right? I invite you to reflect on that question as a framing as we begin here. And I'd love to even hear your answers. You can probably answer this in a variety of different ways from your own end. Feel free to drop that in the comments. But I want to focus on one particular angle for our presentation today to give you an overview of what we're about and what we do at Recover Appalachia. And it has to do with structure itself, right? Structure is essential, I think, in terms of saving lives. Individuals that struggle with a substance use disorder, individuals that are incarcerated for one reason or another, the structure of these environments provide routine, they provide accountability, they provide essential supports to help an individual gain stability in their life, get their head clear, get their feet back underneath them, and begin to reflect on what's happened in their life up to this point to lead them to where they are, and what are the changes that they need to make or can make to make things more successful for them in the future. So structure is essential, but we see kind of a falling off point that often happens in many individuals' lives when they leave the highly structured environment of treatment or incarceration and they kind of step into the void, if you will. And the void is just everyday real life, post-treatment, post-release. The challenge is what happens when the structures that have brought stability to people's lives and have given them an entry point into recovery or a starting point on their journey of recovery is no longer there to sustain them, and they're faced with the normal, everyday messiness of life. You can probably understand this from the perspective of people that you've worked with and are working with now. Life after treatment or incarceration it's unscripted. It's filled with uncertainty. It's filled with ambiguities. It's filled with trade-offs and many fragile pathways that an individual is now expected to just know how to navigate. Maybe they weren't very skilled at navigating those pathways previously, and now they're expected to come out and be successful in this now. The uncertainty that defines post-treatment or post-release life is really what I want to draw in on here, because there are key realities that many returning citizens face after they've gone through treatment or incarceration. They may face things such as stigma from the general public, yes, but maybe also from employers related to perhaps a history of addiction or mental health struggles that they've experienced. A whole lot of ambiguity, not knowing what to do, how to do it, who to connect with, to make happen the things that they need to do in their lives post-release. And a lot of confusion surrounding that. I have a good friend who, to this day, loves to tell the story about how when he first went into prison and stepped down years later, what happened in that intervening time frame was the rise of social media. And he remembers coming out back into society and seeing people on their phones, they're accessing Facebook, they're talking with people all over the world, and it literally blew his mind. So to see the technological changes that had occurred while he was in the justice system. So individuals face a whole lot of uncertainty that they have to navigate post-release. They have kind of this combined sense of urgency. I know I have to do something or some things to be successful here, combined with a real urgent sense of uncertainty, but I really don't know what to do in many cases. So navigating this reality for individuals in hopes of setting them up for success long-term in their reentry requires what we believe are certain transferable skills that will work in many uncertain environments that require self-directed action. And that brings us to the work of Recover Appalachia. If you're not familiar with our organization, Recover Appalachia is a social enterprise, and our mission is to empower rural communities with an entrepreneurial mindset. And we do this specifically by training, educating, helping returning citizens develop skills that enhance their economic mobility. So we're talking about anybody who's coming out of treatment, prison, jail, or any form of rehabilitation. This is the work we do. It's focused on empowerment at the end of it. Regardless of a person's background, regardless of their disposition or their personality, what are the skills that they can develop to help them be more socially and economically mobile? And our work is kind of positioned as complementary to many of the recovery and reentry support systems that are out there right now. Our vision is of a world where a person's past is no longer determined, or their future does not have to be determined by their past. I'm going to pause there just for a moment, let this image on the screen kind of breathe, and invite you to reflect on what that world looks like in your own mind, because I imagine we're all working towards that world to some degree. A world where returning citizens are empowered to succeed. One of the entrepreneur individuals who feature in the curriculum that we offer through our training highlights this very potently, I think. He was a young man who grew up in a broken home, went through the foster care system, spent some time in prison, was in a gang. He said that the programming that he received as a young man coming up through those systems was never that he could be something special. It was only that he had to try to do his best to avoid being something terrible. And you can probably resonate. You can probably see how that messaging, if it's not explicitly stated, often comes through implicitly. It's implied to our returning citizens. Look, you've messed up big time. We're going to cut you loose here, but we just need you to do your best not to mess up again. So Recover Appalachia wants to kind of step into the gap in terms of service provision and offer something for returning citizens that's really focused on developing their full capacity and their full potential as productive citizens in our communities. And the first time for me personally that I began to ask the question of what could it look like if there was an organization focused on delivering this type of targeted entrepreneurial skill training to returning citizens was about 8 or 9 years ago. I think it was 2017. I was volunteering at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, Ohio, under the Chaplain's Mentoring Program. And I met a young man there who told me his story. He had served time on his first stint on a drug-related charge, did his time, got released back into the community. And he got a job working at a local manufacturing facility where he was on like a 90-day probationary period. He also had a girlfriend or a fiance who became pregnant at the time, but they ran into an issue because they only had one vehicle between the two of them. And so they faced a number of choices, he said, at different times when they had to choose whether to prioritize her health, getting to her prenatal doctor's visits, or him showing up to work on time because they only had the one car. They made choices to prioritize her health. He showed up late or missed a few shifts, whatever it was, with the outcome that after the 90-day period, they did not renew him for employment. They let him go. He told me that he felt like he had no other opportunities. He didn't know of any other resources in his community that was available to help him at the time. He felt that urgency and that uncertainty of I've got to do something to support my wife or my girlfriend and our soon-to-be baby. but that uncertainty as well. I don't know what to do, and I don't know who to talk to or where to look for the help that I need. So he went back to doing the thing that he said he knew how to do and do well, which was selling drugs on the streets, which landed him back in prison a second time, then talking to me. That was the first time I began to ask myself, okay, what if there was an organization targeting guys like this, helping them develop skills and a mindset that they could use in ambiguous, uncertain circumstances in everyday life to equip themselves and empower themselves to create meaningful work opportunities where other opportunities may not be currently given to them. So the trade-off there was, this guy, he had skills, he had a willingness, but he was hampered by barriers. In this case, a transportation barrier. And you guys are familiar with all the things that stand in the way of our returning citizens. So the failure wasn't an issue of personal motivation or ability. It was in a sense a lack of agency, and his ability to navigate that setback and that uncertainty and find a more life-affirming, productive way of solving the problem that he faced in that circumstance. So the question that I want to present to you is, what if we prepared people for uncertainty as intentionally as we do encourage them towards sobriety or compliance? When they're part of a highly structured system like treatment or incarceration, how do we prepare them for life on the outside? And I know you guys are all occupied with this question in many ways as it is, but what I'm leading into here is what Recover Appalachia does, why we do it specifically to try to answer this question. What could this look like? What does it look like in your work currently? What are the gaps that you've identified for returning citizens that you serve or that you've encountered along the way that you think would help people be more successful in reentry? All right. I want to pivot to this question because this is the question that we're asking at Recover Appalachia and that we're seeking to answer through our services. What skills are needed to navigate unstructured environments beyond treatment or incarceration? So when an individual gets released, they exit the program, and now there's nobody waking them up at a certain time, telling them where they need to go, where they need to be at certain times, forcing them to sit through certain classes or skills trainings or whatever it might be. When the choice is up to them, now what do I do with my life? What are the skills that an individual needs to navigate those types of environments? All right. We believe it is the skills that are characteristic of what we're going to call an entrepreneurial mindset. So I want to define what that means, what it is, and what it is not, because I think when most people hear the term entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial, they immediately think business creation, and that could very well be a part of it. But the work that we do and the scope of how we define an entrepreneurial mindset goes far beyond that. So we're not talking necessarily about business creation, though that may be a factor in certain participants' lives. We're not talking about anything that's hustle culture or personality based, like this is only a good fit for certain types of people. What we're talking about here is the development of malleable skills that focus on things such as a person's ability to take initiative, their willingness to not avoid problems, but to creatively solve problems that they face in their life and in their environment, their adaptability in the face of changing circumstances, their ability to structure their own life and their own daily environment so that it's optimized for learning, so that they're constantly adapting to the changes in their environment in a way that helps them succeed. And a future orientation. How can they really develop the cognitive capacity and the skills to break with their past habits of thinking, their past habits of behavior that landed them in treatment or incarceration to begin with, or at least contributed to that end, to create for themselves a new future. All of this and more is what we're talking about when we say entrepreneurial mindset training. The entrepreneurial mindset is essentially a learned set of behavioral and cognitive skills that support successful reentry. So what we're talking about here is essentially helping an individual change their operating system, if I can use that metaphor. And maybe you would agree, I think a lot of what's offered to returning citizens in terms of conventional workforce training, very good, though can also often be seen in terms of like a software update. What we're trying to get at for folks is underneath the surface layer of the way they think, of the assumptions that they bring to their life, the things they assume to be true and believe about themselves, about the world, about the marketplace, about other people. How can we get at those underlying assumptions, the mindset that is governing the choices that they are making in life and move the needle forward towards more of an entrepreneurial way of thinking. All right. So, for instance, away from an external locus of control, it's focused more so on what's happening to me rather than how I can respond to what's going on in my life. Focused on things that are outside of a person's control, which leads to a sense of chaos, which leads to a sense of confusion and fear that can often trigger relapses and other negative outcomes. How can we move them from a state where they're more prone to avoid their problems and delay and put off doing the things that they need to do to succeed, that they need to do to reach their goals, towards a problem-solving orientation where they're actually excited to get up and out of bed in the morning and look for problems in their environment to solve? And ultimately to move away from a sense of learned helplessness. A lot of individuals who are returning citizens through social conditioning, through lots of negative experiences and adverse experiences in their past, have developed a learned sense of helplessness. And oftentimes the highly structured environments that then they go through and benefit from also sometimes contribute even more still to a sense of learned helplessness. So how can we help individuals within these highly structured environments move out of them into the real world where it's up to them to self-direct their choices and their actions in life and really develop a future orientation where they know what they want to create for their futures, and they know how to outline goals to get there, and they know how to execute on those ideas. So moving somebody from really a sense of compliance to a sense of ownership. All right. And to give you an overview of the kind of the core curriculum that we use and how it relates to some of these goals, I want to introduce this to you. We use the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program. This program was created in 2007 after a nationwide gap analysis was conducted, looking at all the places where entrepreneurship was taught and asking what was missing. And what they developed out of that gap analysis was a curriculum based on the development of certain life skills, not necessarily business ventures, though it's good for that as well. This curriculum is evidence-based. It's used globally. It's been successfully implemented in a wide variety of contexts, including reentry, prisons, and substance use disorder settings. And what you see on the screen here right now is just an overview of the 8 life lessons. This is the core content that people who go through our programming are exposed to. It's based on the book that you see on the screen that the course itself is based on. So think about this for a minute. We're talking about helping individuals develop skills, starting with the power to choose. How do we help an individual visualize for themselves a future that is different for their past? How do we help them develop the cognitive capacity to see a new future for themselves to the point that it motivates them, that it triggers an emotional response in their body that serves as a source of intrinsic motivation? They're no longer now excited or willing to do the things that they're being told that they should do, but they're excited to get up out of bed in the morning and do the things that they know, they feel deep within their self and their body that this is going to help them create the future that they want for themselves. How do they recognize opportunities as an entrepreneur would in their environment? And that's all about problem solving, not avoiding problems, but running towards them, recognizing that within every problem, there is the seed of its own solution. And if they can learn how to solve problems for themselves and other people, they can create value in the world, value that other people want, value that other people might even be willing to pay money for, which can empower them as the entrepreneur or the entrepreneurially mindseted person in the process. How do they turn their ideas into action, which is where many of us fall off? How do they learn to be a person who can execute on an idea and take it from point A to point B to point C? How can they set up their environment day to day, surround themselves with sources of knowledge that are going to help them become a lifelong learner, where they're constantly learning new things, adapting to their environment, setting themselves up for future success? What does it look like for them to create wealth, to not just spend their resources, and that includes their money, that includes their time, that includes their skill set, to not just squander those things and spend them, but how can they learn to invest their resources in ways that provides a return to them personally? What does it mean to build a personal brand, to become a person that others can rely upon, the person who does what they say they will do? And along the way, recognizing that none of this is achievable on our own, for no man is an island to himself, but how do they create a community, a success network for themselves, a network of people who can help them along the way at various points, from mentors to professional service providers to peers, whatever it might be along the way of the journey to help them succeed. And then through it all, how do they persist? How do they develop personal resiliency through an optimistic outlook that will enable them to bounce back when they are inevitably faced with failure, setback, rejection, when they're told no, when things don't go well. All the things that might trigger a relapse and lead to choices that end a person up back in the system or back in treatment. How can they learn to persevere through hardship? So these are some of the core contents that we teach through our program. It's based on kind of these core components. It's experiential learning, because that's what entrepreneurial learning is. Many of the individuals we serve in reentry and recovery are not the type of individuals who are best served by a classroom, like just showing up like they did at school in K through 12 and kind of being given a lecture, maybe a handout, and taught to memorize some facts. This is experiential learning. It's learning by doing. It's connected to their own personal interests and abilities, right? And it's action oriented. It's also identity safe. There's no pressure within the programming that we provide for a person to be a founder or an entrepreneur or start a business. Again, the skills that we're teaching, the practices that we're helping people develop are very much useful and valuable to a wide number of participants. And there's a lot of reflection to it, right? One of the things that a person comes away with through our training is a very much deeper level of self-awareness. So we do a lot of reflecting through the course, asking why. Why do you think that way? What is it that you're afraid of that is holding you back from making that connection with that person in your community that you think can help you do this thing? And it's very peer-based and it's very student-centered. We also use an assessment and coaching tool called the Entrepreneurial Mindset Profile, the EMP for short. The EMP is the only empirically validated tool on the market that measures entrepreneurial skill sets. And it's broken down into two scales that you can see there, the personality and skill scales. Personality takes into account the fact that some people do have a certain disposition that sets them up more towards the path of entrepreneurship. It's their baseline. But the skills, what we really focus on are the malleable things, the things that can be changed, the things that can be grown or developed through practice, through effort, through help, through dedication. So we use the EMP as a tool just for coaching and for assessment at the beginning of the program and at the end of the program to see if and how the needle has moved forward in any of these skill areas for the individuals we serve. And we note with people, there's no good or bad scores. It's just a tool used to help build self-awareness and guide our conversations with people on an individual basis. So what's the heart of it all? What this all comes down to, the work of Recover Appalachia, is based on a sense of agency. We're helping individuals reclaim a sense of agency that has been lost, whether through addiction, whether through a sense of learned helplessness, whether through traumas and adverse childhood experiences that they've experienced that have led them along the path to end up where they are. All of it resolves itself down to a loss of agency. We define that as the capacity to make choices and to take actions that influence one's life and environment. This is based on a sense of competence, autonomy, and belonging. And those are not just three fancy words that we made up. This is based on Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory. So there's a whole body of research out there that shows that for an individual human being to flourish in life, they have to feel good about what they do in life. They have to feel that they are capable, that they bring value to their community. They have to feel that they're in control of their life, that they're an autonomous person, and that they belong. They have a sense of connection within their community. If you have those three things and you're firing on all cylinders, that's going to set you up for a life of flourishing where you have a strong sense of personal agency in your life. And at the heart of our work, that's what we're helping people recover, is this sense of agency, which leads to choices and actions that help people create new futures for themselves, their families, and the communities that they serve. So there's a wide body of research that our work is based upon. That's available upon request if you'd like to see any of that. The research literature that's out there that shows the improved outcomes in recovery and reentry settings via entrepreneurship-based interventions. I'm happy to share that with you after this webinar. Because all of this ties directly to recovery capital and long-term outcomes that I know you care about for the people that you serve. So before I move into my conversation with our guest, I want to ask, what can this look like in actual practice, right? The theories are there, the words are there, it all sounds very nice. What does it look like in practice? We were privileged to deliver a pilot program in partnership with Future Plans Ohio in November. And what you see on the screen here are just some of the outcomes from participant surveys reflecting the changes that they experienced. We partnered with 2 local treatment centers here in Sauter County and ran 4 cohorts total over a 4-week training. And these are some of the things that participants said going through that program. We saw shifts in identity and shifts in just the fundamental way that people were thinking about their lives. They said things like, I actually want to do something now, indicating a renewed sense of agency. That they'd gone through this 4-week program, they'd seen kind of a new possibility for themselves, and they felt an intrinsic sense of motivation as a result of that. Goal setting was a big one, a big outcome we saw. Participants reporting that they were now felt that they were better equipped and able to set and actually achieve goals for themselves, where it wasn't really clear before how they wanted to get to where they were going. Now it was much more clear, the steps ABC that they needed to take, and they knew how that they could begin to execute on those things in their lives or connect with the people who could help them execute on them. One client said, this is the best thing we've ever done here. I think everybody should do this. All the treatment centers in town should be doing this delivery. Again, just anecdotal evidence that we heard back from some of the participants that we worked with in November, all kind of focused in these 4 areas here. And this was patterns that we saw in the feedback surveys across all 4 pilots that we ran in November. An increased sense of personal agency, the beginnings of a shift in how a person sees themselves, that, hey, a big part of our process is redefining entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education. This is not just for someone who wants to start a business, though you might want to, and we can help you on that path if that's what you want to do. We have a wide referral and partner network who can help you start and maintain a business. But just seeing yourself as a value creator, because that's what entrepreneurship essentially is. It's this ability to solve problems and create value that other people in the world need and other people in the world want. And if you can do that effectively and consistently, you can also empower yourself with opportunities in the process that may not be available to you otherwise. A much deeper sense of engagement with their own process. We had one individual come through the program, and he was living in a halfway house here in town. And he told me he was just basically waiting on a callback for a job application. And that's pretty much what he spent his days doing. And it was kind of a light bulb moment for him through this training that, hey, maybe I don't just have to sit and wait for somebody to give me a job. Maybe I can take the skills that I have currently and I can put them to work and create, some type of side hustle or some type of business for myself where I can begin to make money and I can begin to create opportunities for myself that aren't being given to me now. And really a deeper sense of social connection. We referred out individuals in this pilot to our partners for further one-on-one business consulting, a couple of them who were interested in that. We're building out an alumni network of past program participants where we're going to continue to expose them to opportunities for new training and education and connection in the future. So these are some of the outcomes that we've seen that all serve, I think, within the wider ecosystem to help individuals build their recovery capital. So our work is not about replacing clinical treatment whatsoever. It's about coming alongside of those providers in the reentry space who are doing fantastic work as it is and filling a gap that we see where we can help prepare people specifically with skills that are going to help them navigate the ambiguity and the complexity of post-release life in ways, hopefully, that set them up for success long-term. So we're talking about an improved transfer of learning and skills from inside the program or the system to outside. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to introduce you now to my special guest. I have with me today Taylor Golden. He's going to come on the screen here in just a minute, and we're going to have a conversation. Taylor is the founder of Empower Treatment. Empower Treatment is a mental health and addiction telehealth provider in our area. And we were privileged to partner with Taylor and take some of their participants, their clients, through our training in November, and really learned a lot from this partnership in terms of how we can embed mindset training as a complement to the clinical care that Empower Treatment and other providers throughout our region are offering. So I'm going to stop my screen share now, and I'm going to let Taylor come onto the screen. There he is. Hi, Taylor. Introduce yourself, Taylor. Talk about your work in the community, and then let's kind of lead into a conversation here based on what we've said, based on the outcomes, the impact that you saw on the participants there at Empower Treatment. What are your impressions so far of this work and its value to Empower Treatment clients?
Yeah. Well, howdy, y'all. It's groovy to meet with you today. It's a real privilege to be here. Again, my name's Taylor. I'm one of the co-founders of Empower Treatment. So we are seeking to be one of the most successful low-barrier recovery organizations in the state of Ohio. Our 4 pillars are trauma-informed care, low-barrier philosophy, grounding our work in harm reduction, and liberation. So we were really privileged to be part of Recover Appalachia's first pilot program in our region. In terms of the impressions that we stepped away with it from, I'll say that I had the privilege to join for some of the classes, and I took a lot away from it individually. One of Just to kind of set the scene for what I've been used to in terms of like workforce development and recovery, a lot of different programs, it's kind of a rehashing or the same vibe as hey, let's retrofit, let's teach coal miners how to code. Or it's, Josh, I think you had said it beautifully, where we're trying to prompt folk not on like what is possible or what they could achieve, but really like, hey, stay inside the lines here. Don't do this. Don't do X. Don't do Y. If your father was a pipe fitter, great profession, go for that. Kind of we want you to sort of like settle in a place where you're stable. This Recover Appalachia is a very unique curriculum. It really felt like an actual antithesis to that. Feels like it is grounded in agency and promoting agency. Dr. Paul Conti, he's one of the leading minds in trauma recovery in the United States, and one of the biggest predictors that he articulates for whether or not somebody will be able to recover from a traumatic experience is whether or not that person has a sense of agency, whether or not they're able to live a self-directed life. So what Recover Appalachia does is it really flips the workforce development conversation on its head and gives the power back to the individual rather than kind of trying to fill a whole shape with a square peg. So yeah, genuinely, it's a very unique curriculum. It's something that is empowering agency. In terms of my key takeaway, as it so happens, the things that will predict whether or not somebody will be successful in whatever their individual recoveries are goal, because recovery goals are, because recovery is an individual process. The things that prepare someone for success in recovery happen to be a lot of the same things that prepare someone for success in entrepreneurship or in leadership in their space. I mean, that Venn diagram is almost a circle. It was that was one of the key takeaways that I walked away from the program with, and was echoed by some of our patients, is that, hey, all of these things that we're promoting in our recovery practices, as far as, hey, promoting agency, hey, let's build upon resilience. Let's build for an ever-changing world where the context is going to change, the landscape is going to shift. But we want you to have the tools, means, and skills, and build from a strengths-based perspective to be able to weather whatever storm comes your way. So I was really taken aback by how relevant this curriculum in particular and the entrepreneurial mindset is for recovery practices. I mean, for me, it felt like a sort of chocolate peanut butter situation. Like they're better together.
So, in terms of relevance, Taylor, thinking of Appalachian communities, right? We're here, we're in Portsmouth, Ohio. This is ground zero for us, right? In terms of the opioid crisis, this is where a lot of it began. And it's not like we were doing that great to begin with from a socioeconomic standpoint. Lots of poverty, generational struggles, resource constrained. We know what it's like to be resource constrained in Appalachian communities, right? So what specific relevance do you see for this type of training for individuals, and the communities, the whole community benefit, because that's what I want to keep in view as well. If we're equipping and empowering individuals, returning citizens who are coming out of treatment, coming out of prison, to navigate uncertainty and recognize opportunities to create value, maybe that's in the form of a business venture, maybe it's not. But this is going to help them be more successful as an employee, just as a human being. What is the relevance specifically within the Appalachian context in which we're living and working here for individuals who are coming from families and backgrounds that are already, in many cases impoverished? We've experienced lots of generational trauma, and trying to pull ourselves out of that in a true bootstrapping Appalachian / entrepreneur sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's a that's a deep, profound question, really. So in Appalachia, we are familiar with a sort of extractive economics, where outside players kind of come into our community, they leverage our labor, they leverage our natural resources, they extract that wealth, and it's not reinvested back into our region. I would also say that for someone to turn to addiction or to a problematic substance use, a problematic behaviors, say gambling, something like that, I would actually posit that it is maybe not a reasonable response, but not an unreasonable response to a dwindling American dream that I think many folk in Appalachia feel, where when you're sitting down and forecasting your life ahead and you can't picture a life where your kids are going to have a better life than you, when education is unaffordable at the higher levels and vocational training, when there isn't the same economic opportunity where you could just pick up a job anywhere and retire with a pension, when you're looking ahead and not seeing a life where your kids and their kids could have a better life than you, I think turning to problematic self-harming behaviors, whether it's drug use, behavioral addictions, I think it's not necessarily an unreasonable response. So I definitely want to start
Mhm.
there. And we know that economic conditions are a big indicator of potential for relapse, overdose, et cetera. Food insecurity. It's all interconnected and intersectional. Um, Now, with that, limitations breed creativity. So a mentor of mine has a funny turn of phrase where he'll say, "Look, if you get four folk in recovery and you give them a pile of scrap outside, if you come back later and they're going to have built a spaceship." People in recovery are some of the most innovative,
Mhm.
resilient, hardworking, just naturally creative and curious people that you will ever meet. So recognizing that our folk in recovery, once they have the stabilizing connections and the foundation to build and work from that they need for that like kind of stability, uh, these folk are an asset to our region. They are the furthest thing
Mhm.
from a liability. Josh, kind of or borrow a phrase that I've heard you use before. They really are the sort of untapped resource that, if channeled in the right way and empowered in the right way, could be transformative for our region. Recognizing that, hey, there's no Hail Mary coming from the federal government, from the state government, from anything like that. So anything that we earn as communities, as we recover as individuals and communities, we have to earn that from the sweat of our own brow and from the contours that we're working against, as far as the limitations and the creative solutions that we come to as a result.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things long term that we want to do with our work is ground it all in real time, ongoing research, right? I mentioned during the presentation that there is a body of literature out there right now that suggests strong improved outcomes in recovery and reentry settings with entrepreneur based interventions. What's still emerging and what we hope to contribute to is this training that's very much focused on the mindset piece of entrepreneurship, not just helping someone start a new business, but helping them develop the cognitive skills that are common to entrepreneurs who are successful in the world and how that can apply in a wide variety of contexts to ultimately, hopefully, create a social return on investment model, a tool that communities like ours can use to show, okay, to show funders, to show city council people, county commissioners, community leaders, what is the value of investing in this work? And by this work, I mean just not like our organization, but of investing in returning citizens and supporting them and empowering them to create new futures for themselves and their families. What is the whole community wide value to that type of work? And how can we begin to turn our attention to that and create those opportunities now for these folks that are struggling to get back on their feet post release, post incarceration, post treatment? I know that's not a question. Anything that comes to your mind in terms of, I know I'm asking you to think broad and big here, but that's what these events for. This is a professional learning series. I'm here to learn as much as I am to help hopefully contribute some things that our participants here will learn as well. But what do you see to be the wider community benefits and values of serving our returning citizens, our folks who are in recovery and treatment? Because there's a lot of pushback in some communities right now, because so much resource has been given to the development of the SUD treatment industry, for instance, and this is reigniting some old stigmas that a lot of people have latent in our communities. It's bringing it back to the fore. So how can we show folks the overall community value as well to this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the question that should be pressing in front of our minds here. And now, while I don't claim to have, kind of all the answers here, in terms of directions I point to, I'd say you're hitting something squarely on the head where, a lot of folk in recovery, they're in often vulnerable positions. People who use drugs and folk who are actively moving through the recovery process. When you are kind of in the chaos of the storm, it is hard to be an advocate for yourself. It's challenging to be an advocate for your community, et cetera. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of folk in the recovery community, and speaking using an I statement here, my read is that they are not this real detriment to society that you'll see posted on by these Facebook meme accounts. That really, it's unfortunate that kind of the most vulnerable folk in in our communities often get scapegoated by folk in power. So, it's very easy and it's politically convenient to point to a group of people and say those folk are the root of our community's issues. Oh my gosh, if only we could ship them over to the next county, we would be able to resolve all of this. It's a really simple, convenient message. It kind of plays into a very natural human tribalism that we all sort of find ourselves falling into. While it's a convenient story, it's the furthest thing from an accurate story, and it's one that disempowers. So, sort of remedy I see on this side of things is really community power building. It's through recognizing, like, hey, economic conditions are shifting. It is all hands on deck. So, kind of meeting you where you're at and not leaving you there. That is key for not only your individual recovery, but our recovery as a community, as a region, as not only you reclaim agency of your life and live a self-directed life, but we as community members, we as Appalachian folk reclaim a sense of agency, and we flip the script as far as the story that's told about us. Where the narrative you hear is Portsmouth is this kind of red dot on the map during the opioid epidemic that then spreads out and pollutes and infects the rest of the country. And while I don't even think that that's wholly true, getting folk to have a constructive, forward-thinking, positive vision. So not just to run away from what's come before in our past, but something to run towards. We have the opportunity, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that Portsmouth has the ability to be a shining beacon, showing the rest of Appalachia what's possible when we really leverage the assets of our folk with lived experience of recovery, people use drugs, et cetera. We have the opportunity to be that blue dot on the map of evidence-based, forward-thinking solutions that spreads out to the rest of the country, and empowers the rest of the country that way. So I would say community power building is huge. And then also centering the voices and lived experience of the folk in recovery. So I think if you are an ally in the space, if you don't have direct experience of recovery or problematic, substance use or problematic addictive behaviors yourself, I think it's our collective responsibility to amplify the voice, choice, and agency of those folk. So giving them a leg up, again, meeting them where they're at, and not leaving them there.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to try to give folks here a sense of the practical value of this. We talk about mindset training that can sound very intangible, very out there, very hard to quantify, hard to measure, right? So a mindset is it's how we see the world. It's our mental filter. It's the thing that all of our choices get passed through before they are acted upon. And it's based on a whole lot of past experience. So when we're talking about returning citizens who may have trauma, who may have addictions, who may have all these things in their past, that's informing their current worldview, their mindset, right? So if we're helping teach people cognitive skills that they can use to kind of break with their past, where they identify, hey, these are self-limiting beliefs I'm holding. These are things that are not helping me, but they're hindering me. And how can I imagine for myself a new and a different future? You alluded to that already on kind of a collective Appalachian basis. But on the individual level, I'd like to maybe ask you, you set in, like you said, on a few sessions that we did with your clients. The one session I remember you were there, we did a visioning exercise with the participants where we kind of walked them through this process of imagining the future that they wanted to create for themselves. which sounds at face value, it sounds very woo woo. It sounds very like, okay, soft and fluffy, but it can be a very profound and practically advantageous experience, a practice, especially if you can imagine and visualize for yourself a life so distinctly that it triggers an emotional response in your body, because that begins to motivate you to then create that life. Elite athletes do this all the time. It's applied in many wide contexts. So we're trying to bring that here with our mindset training. So you sat in on that session. And I think if I remember correctly, you told me that you kind of took a little bit of those tools that we used and applied them with maybe with your team at Empower after the fact. Tell me a little bit about what you saw, the value you saw in that kind of prompted you to actually go use that tool for yourself with Empower staff.
Oh yeah, and I mean I used it like individually, selfishly as well, because I think doing that exercise, um, we all have kind of thoughts in our own heads of when you're transitioning between moments, you're thinking, okay, maybe the future might look good this way or that way. I think sitting down and actually doing the exercise shows uh, just how, like, there are very, unless you're like very intentional about it or someone shows you how to do this stuff, you're not likely to encounter a touch point that actually does these sort of like empowers you with these evidence-based visualization and planning strategies. This isn't something that you're going to typically see even in the K through 12 setting, through college, through vocational training. In my own experience, like I had never done an exercise like that all my time, going through the K through 12 system in Scioto County, or any of my time in college. So. Um, I think what it does, as you had specifically said, Josh, it really does kind of quash some of these self-limiting beliefs. What it does is it allows for a sort of openness and kind of reemergence of what I would argue is a sort of like level of plasticity in the brain that allows you to kind of reform what were once really recursive thought patterns. So a metaphor that I would use is, if you imagine skiers on a slope, if it's a fresh slope, and I don't ski, so that's how rich people die. That ain't something I do. But the metaphor, if you imagine a ski slope with a fresh coat of snow, as folks ski down the slope, they're going to create ruts. And naturally, as other folks ski, they're going to follow those same patterns and those same pathways because it's the path of least resistance. I think the mind is similar in that way, where unless we're shaken out of it, having the same kind of recursive thoughts of, hey, I'm not enough, even if it's an implicit thought. Or I do want this thing, but there's no way I could achieve it. I'm just not made for that. The more we have these recursive thoughts, the more they solidify into those kind of consistent patterns of thinking. However, it takes kind of perspective shifting activities and intentional perspective shifting activities, like what the curriculum of Recover Appalachia offers, to sort of allow the hill to have a fresh coat of snow, where you can reform and have new thought patterns. To where before it was, okay, well, I couldn't possibly do that because of X, Y, Z. Now it's, hey, I at least have the kind of breath or space to breathe, the freedom and the opportunity to reform these thought patterns, and to have more empowering ones, and ones that can further allow me to be successful in my recovery as an individual, or and to contribute to recovery as a community. So I'd say like the individual benefits of this exercise, I think, transcend just working in the recovery community. I think Recover Appalachia does amazing because they tailor it to this group of folk who have been left out of this conversation, who really haven't had, well curated, well tailored resources directed at them. But I would say the benefits of a program like this extend far beyond folk in recovery to us as individuals, and of course, us as communities in recovery.
Yeah, that's good. I'm thinking also of like social connection value.
Yeah.
Social capital is the expression you hear that is like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in terms of, in business terms, in entrepreneurship, traditionally understood, that's huge, right? There are opportunities that can be made available to you just because you know someone who can connect you with someone else who can open that door for you. And these are some of the spaces that returning citizens, like you said, are often cut out from or excluded from or not welcomed into, so to speak. One of the things that I noticed in one of Empower's clients during our pilot program was he talked about how he knew in his mind, one of the self-limiting beliefs he kind of touched on was he knew in his mind that he needed to be more social, that he needed to be more open to reaching out and connecting with people that could help him succeed. But he was very hesitant to do that. He felt he was a very withdrawn person. He had different fears related to that kind of kept him from reaching out. But we had one guest speaker come into one of our sessions because we believe strongly in offering socially relatable models to our participants. So what that means is we're not holding up as examples to emulate guys like Elon Musk or Silicon Valley, types or venture capitalists, right? The types we see in the media that are often associated with like entrepreneurship, because those folks, let's be honest, their lives, their backgrounds, their experiences don't touch upon the experiences of many of our returning citizens. So there's a disconnect there. So we hold up socially relatable models. This is individuals who have lived experience. They've been in prison or they have lived experience in recovery, but they've also been successful in business as an entrepreneur in some capacity. And we brought in a guy to guest speak during one of the sessions. And this client of yours that I'm thinking of really connected with him. I was very much impressed by his story. He talked about how he was really surprised. He did not expect to connect so well, to feel such a resonance with this guy that he immediately was like, whoa, look at this success. He immediately thought, well, he can't be like me. Right. But then he made the connection. Well, this guy's been in prison. This guy was in prison like 4 years ago. Right. And he's come out and he's done these things. And after the program was over, he asked me for his contact info because he said he wanted to reach out. He wanted to connect. He wanted to stay in touch with this guy, which was a real step for this client of yours, is what I'm saying, based on everything he shared with me. It was a real clear example of a self-limiting belief that he identified. He had his finger on it, and then he planned to take action on it post program to actually change that in a way that was probably going to help him succeed long
Yeah.
term. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Is the social capital value for people in recovery?
Absolutely, yeah. So, the quote is kind of trite but true. Johann Hari says that the opposite of addiction isn't connection. The opposite or isn't sorry. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So yeah, in terms of building up somebody's social assets, their social support network, that is a huge indicator especially when you're diving deeper into the data around recovery, relapse, et cetera. It is a huge indicator of whether or not somebody has a higher chance or lower chance of relapse, of overdose, et cetera. So, being able to build and bolster connective tissue with other human beings, feel that you're a part of something larger than yourself. That is a huge, just tremendous wind in the sails that can really make or break somebody's recovery path. And Recover Appalachia did a really good job of promoting folk who have those lived experience and showing like, hey, there are folk who have walked this path before you that you can emulate, and to your point on the folk that in our country we typically prop up as like, oh, these are titans of industry and such. Well, unlike Elon Musk, I have yet to meet many folk in recovery who, their family owned an emerald mine in South Africa, So there are, we prop up these figures and make them near mythological, and you can't really connect with them because it's a totally different lived experience, totally different economic experience that they're coming from. Um, Being able to show somebody like, hey, despite your present circumstances, again, there are folk who have paved the way before you, and folk you can leverage and connect with. Um, because so much, I feel so much of the suffering that comes from addiction really stems from, of course, trauma, but then not being able to resolve that trauma in a larger context, getting support from others. So leaning into the isolation, it's easy to kind of engender a sort of learned hopelessness from that, where you feel wholeheartedly like, oh my gosh, these problems, they are mine and mine alone, and you identify with that suffering. And when you bring identity into the picture and you cling to that, you suffer even more in the imagination. So yeah, the importance of building on folks' social assets, both within the recovery community and outside of it, I think is key. So not just setting our folk up in such a way where, okay, you can only connect with folk in recovery. So anything outside of that, you really shouldn't be touching, because are they really going to welcome you in that space at all? And we see it, I feel, in Southern Ohio, Northern Kentucky, the parts of West Virginia that I work in, where, in a lot of programs, you'll see the recovery community is over here and the rest of the community is over here, and never the twins shall meet. And I also think that that allows for an othering of our people, where politically savvy folk can come take the reins and point to the recovery community and say, look, they're the ones who are really they're the ones driving up housing prices, because they're getting their folk housing and stuff like that, rather than dealing with the actual reality on the ground that all of us are facing, not just the recovery community over here and the larger, broader community over here. So I think being able to build these mechanisms for social connectivity, it allows for a solidarity that is unifying, and we're stronger together. So I'm confident that you can build taller if you have a larger foundation. So
Yeah,
the social connection piece is paramount.
that's good. Yeah. So all of these elements and more kind of flowing in and out of our work here. Maybe as a last question for you, Taylor, before we move on towards the close here, and allow other people space for questions. If you have any, feel free to have those ready, or drop them in the chat right now. But we're hoping to work together some more, right, in the future. Recover Appalachia and Empower Treatment. I was planning to mention this as one of our bullet points at the end for what's upcoming. But we're hoping to go in together on a grant with the One Ohio Recovery Foundation, right? So just beginning to do some planning on that. But what are your hopes related to kind of the future for this partnership, and maybe others like it, perhaps with folks on this call, that we could maybe even bring into that project, for kind of the ripple effects of this kind of training, and bringing it to recovery service providers and reentry specialists across Southern Ohio. What are your hopes, and what are your thoughts on that at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, high hopes, just because it's been a tremendous program, from my perspective, from the perspective of our patients that went through it. So I'd say that my biggest hope here is that we kind of flip the script when it comes to recovery-based workforce development, where it's like, hey, we're not just preparing you to, to get a job and punch your 9 to 5 card and call it a day. We're coming from a strengths-based perspective and building on your strengths and empowering you with skills that will serve you no matter what season of life, no matter where you find yourself in the world, and that you can always come back to and find as a sort of bastion of resilience. So I would say we're trying to support folk in recovery with being able to draw from a deeper well. When it comes to when it comes to the chaos that kind of can surround active addiction, recovery, relapse, etc. So I think building upon, of course, building and bolstering like social networks through this process. So having different programs, utilizing Recover Appalachia's curriculum and getting different insights out of it, and cross-pollinating those, I think, is going to be big and great for the field. I also think I'm confident that the folk leaving the program are going to go out into the community and start, building themselves, start connecting themselves. And I think with enough of that, where if we focus on, hey, recovery is, yes, it's an individual process, but it's also a community process. There's an opportunity for connectivity here. There's an opportunity for integration. So having kind of all of these providers standing in solidarity at once and saying, hey, we're preparing our folk not just to be successful in their own individual recovery, and not just to do really well in the recovery community, not just to kind of punch their ticket in their 9 to 5 and then punch their ticket at their NA meetings, AA meetings, MARA meetings, whatever it may be. But we're really preparing these folk to move even beyond the recovery community and integrate with the broader, larger community. And I think it's a lot harder for folk in power to point and scapegoat to folk in recovery and blame them for the ills of their community, when it's the folk on recovery who are on the front lines, doing the day in, day out service work, and also leading the charge when it comes to the sort of revitalization and building back and reclaiming that we're trying to do in Appalachia. So I think, it's kind of dual track where, yes, we're making sure folk have fish on the plate to eat and teaching them how to fish. So my real hope for it is that we get a bunch of great cross pollination of ideas and insights between all the providers running the Recover Appalachia program, and that we sort of empower this next generation of folk in recovery to yes. Do well in your individual recovery. Yes, contribute to the recovery community, but beyond that, help us build and bolster Appalachia and help, put places like Portsmouth on the map as a sort of Phoenix city rising from the ashes without any need of help or handouts from folk outside of our community.
Yes, absolutely. Amen. And all the things. Taylor, thank you so much for those comments. Always a pleasure to talk with you and work with you, and excited to continue that work together as well. Stay on the screen with me now. What I want to do before I conclude things for the others on our call today is really open up for a moment. If anybody out there who is listening in to this call has any questions, has any comments that you would like to share, now is the time to do that. So I'm going to pause for just a minute. I'm going to check the chat myself. Yep. Thank you, Samantha, for joining us. Jennifer as well. Thank you so much. We'll send out slides and recording of this after the fact as well, for those who had to jump early. If there's no one else that has any questions, I'm going to share my screen again and wind this up. Thank you again, Taylor. Taylor, make sure that you drop your contact information in the chat in case anybody on here wants to connect with you after the fact.
Absolutely. And Josh, it's a real privilege to be here. I consider you a friend and mentor and a real maverick in our space. So it's a privilege to be partnering with you on this journey. And for everybody listening, I'll go ahead and drop my contact information here. If you hop off this call and you're like, oh man, I wish I would have asked XYZ, feel free to holler. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep moving it forward. And I'm just grateful for everybody's time and attention and giving it to us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taylor. And to wind it up for everybody who's still with us, this is an invitation. We want to work with you. So Recover Appalachia, we're currently actively seeking new partnerships with providers in the recovery and reentry space on multiple fronts. And that can look like a whole lot of different things. We're building out new pilot programs for 2026. We're going to continue this webinar series, so keep it on your radar. Once a month, we're going to explore our work and how it relates to recovery providers from different aspects, and have other guest speakers join us as we go to have this kind of professional learning series ongoing throughout the year. We are also launching a podcast, the Reclaiming Agency podcast. I'm getting ready to do an interview with our first guest speaker on that this week. That's going to be a once a month conversation that we have with individuals with lived experience in reentry recovery, practitioners in the field, economic development specialists, all having conversations surrounding this subject of agency. How is agency lost, and how is it reclaimed among individuals and among communities? So those are going to be longer form conversations, similar to what you saw Taylor and I just do, exploring these issues. We're also going to be hosting our first community event in April, which is National Second Chance Month. It's called Together We Rise. This is going to include, among other things, a panel discussion with featuring individuals with lived experience and a couple professionals in the field. We'll probably also have kind of an open network tabling event. So if you have an organization that you would like to partner with us and show up as a vendor and share information, connect with other organizations at that event, we invite you to reach out to me about that. You can even be part of the planning process if you'd like, but that's going to be hosted somewhere in Portsmouth in Sauter County in April. We're also working right now on the development of a digital skills pilot. We recently received some grant funding to incorporate some digital skills training, specifically AI literacy, that we're going to integrate with our mindset training and do a pilot with up to 10 individuals in treatment or recovery that we're hoping to launch that program in the second quarter of this year. And we're actively seeking partnerships, maybe with a service provider, to help us recruit participants for that program. So if you're interested in more info on that, please reach out. The One Ohio Grant Project that Taylor and I spoke a bit about there as well. will be hopefully submitted soon. And so we're looking for partners among SUD treatment providers to go in on that project with us to serve as host locations. So to kind of enable us to come in and provide training and provide programming for your clients. And that'll be based very much upon your organizational capacity, the needs of the people you serve, because we're able to deliver at multiple varying levels of care. And it'll be a really light lift for our SUD program partners. We're not going to ask you to do much. We're not going to try to add workload to what you've already got going on, but we need partners there who will host us for the trainings that we're going to deliver, hopefully through that grant program. And then any other forms of contracted program delivery, we're open to exploring. We have information that we can send you if you'd like to explore that together as well. Finally, I'd invite you to sign up for our newsletter. If you want, you can hit the QR code there or go to recoverappalachia.org/newsletter. But again, I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. I invite you to continue this conversation with us moving forward into the future. And have a great day.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right. Stop that recording.